going to show you 5 ways to upgrade your table saw to make it cut cleaner, be safer to use, be more accurate, and all around more fun to use. Let's go. If you'd like to check out any of these upgrades that I show, I'll link those in the description and the pinned comment to help you find them easier. I do think the outlaw effect could be in play on number 1, so you might want to check this one out first. Now, let's go. First on the list, this is fairly new. It came out this year, if I'm not mistaken. This is the JessEm stock guides. Now, they sent these over for me to try, but I bought a pair a few years ago and actually made a video on that, on how to use it on a big table saw. There was no option to use it on a job site table saw. Out of the box, everything comes very nicely packaged. You're getting the stock guides and the mounting hardware, everything you need to mount it to a job site saw. But there is an option if you wanted to pick up this jig that they sell with 2 magnets that will adapt to saws like your saw stop. But a lot of people wanted these to be able to adapt to a job site saw when the first edition come out. Now they have these, they're new and improved, and they will work on job site saws. Now how these actually work is they prevent kickback and they keep your cuts more accurate because they're applying pressure down and toward the fence while you're making your cut. And because these rollers are one way only, it will help prevent that board from trying to kick back. If you're going to use this on a cabinet saw or any other style fence like this saw stop has, you can use this jig that JessEm also sells, and it mounts these stock guides to that fence very easily. First and foremost, these fit right inside of these nice molded cutouts, and then you just put the same mounting hardware into these to mount them. And then it also comes with 2 mag jigs that you can turn off and on. And what's great about that is you can remove it from the fence when you don't need it. And I find that this is awesome because then you can just store it on anything metal like this toolbox. You can just set it up there when you don't want them. What's great about these is no matter which saw you're using them on, no matter if it's a compact job site saw or a cabinet saw, they work exactly the same. They're going to give you a safer cut because they're going to help prevent kickback. They're also going to give you a more accurate cut. And because these wheels are actually tilted at a 5-degree angle towards the fence, and they also roll one way, it's going to give you accurate cuts and anti-kickback because they don't roll backwards. But they do tilt toward the fence so that when you're pushing your stock through, even if you start off a little wrong before you get to the blade, you'll see that it'll correct your mistake there and keep everything the pressure towards the fence. This is awesome because it's going to give you a safer, cleaner cut. Now, to adjust them, very easy. All you do, loosen the little black thumb screw. You're going to move these out just as much as you need it and then tilt them down toward the stock. Make sure you have the stock under them, but not under the rubberized roller. What you want to do is put it on the outside roller, that metal roller, and that's the gauge of where you need to set these. Once those bump out on your material, you'll just snug these little thumb screws up. Do that on both rollers, you're good to go. From there, when you're cutting, what you see is exactly what I just told you. It's pushing the material towards the fence. It's also keeping pressure down, so you're getting 2 forces of pressure on the board, straight down and towards the fence, which is exactly what you want. When you're using a push stick, that's exactly what you're doing. You're down and toward the fence. That way you get a good, accurate cut. It's going to be cleaner, safer, and all around just more accurate because of that. So we want to try them on the job site saw because I think that's where most of you are interested in this. So to install these brackets on your fence, very easy. All you do was mark a line right down the center of this fence. Mine's 1 inch wide, so it was right at the 1/2 inch. Then you place those stock guides on top and position them about a 1/2 inch from in front and behind the blade. You want to raise your blade all the way up so that you know exactly where that's going to be. And then from there, you're just going to mark the holes. Now, when you mount these, make sure you get the right hole. So on the stock guides, on the back side of them, so the closest to you, back here where you adjust the blade, you want to mark the 2nd hole. On the front side of this guide, you make sure you mark that last hole. If you don't, you'll be off. But the great thing is they do include these brackets, and you can lay those on top before you drill and make sure you have the 2 correct holes marked. They actually include a drill bit. Thank you, JessEm. That way I don't have to scrap for one or find the wrong size or use the wrong size. They include the right one. Now here's a power tip for you. If you don't have one of these, get one. This is a spring-loaded center punch. What this is going to do is basically punch a little dent in this aluminum. It also works on wood. I use it all the time so that you get your drill bit positioned correctly when you drill the hole. That way it's not walking around on you and you get a nice hole drilled there. Now, if they're slightly off, is it going to be the end of the world? No, you're not building a clock. It doesn't matter that much. But you want to get them very close, and this will help. After you do that, it's very easy to mount it. You're going to slide that bracket on the inside, and then drive those screws from the top. They probably recommend, if I read the instructions, that you would use some type of hand tool to do this. Now I did back this impact driver to a 1 power, and then I also drove them very slowly. I didn't want to strip any of this out. So it is tight, but not overly tight. Once you get both of those installed, we're gonna reassemble our fence, including our flip stop. From there, there's 4 brackets to mount on there, and that's just gonna give that extra support to keep any deflection from happening when you're using these stock guides. They're very easy to install. What I use a 3/8 inch wrench, which I think is slightly too big, but I didn't have the correct millimeter size. I love to see that JessEm thought of a lot here with these stock guides. First, they didn't want to render your fence unusable in the normal way that it's used. So if you take the guides off, you leave the brackets on, then you can still use your flip stop for that extra material supports. When you're cutting wider stock, you have that flip down support. And then you can also still use it to cut thin stock, just like you normally would. But if you don't need that, you can still flip that out of the way and still have your stock guides. So once the bracket's on, installing stock guides can't be easier. You see the little tabs up there, you're gonna place them on there, slide them to the back, and then you're gonna tighten up that thumb screw. It's installed. These are adjustable, so they will fit various size fences, so I do like to see that. Now that everything's installed, it's time to put them through the test. Let's go. One thing I noticed on these when I mounted them to the job site saw fence is they do need to be adjusted, and so they do have 2 bolts here that you can loosen and then extend out your arms. You just want to make sure that you're still clearing the blade there at that angle where it could impact the blade. Mine had no issues there, mounted exactly like they instructed, but I did have to extend those down because of this taller fence versus the one that was on the saw stop. So it is adjustable, which I'm so glad they've thought of basically everything. Now I adjusted to 3/4 inch plywood. Now we just cut some walnut with it, and it obviously did just great on that. But now we're gonna cut this plywood using this job site saw and these stock guides. I think this is where these stock guides really excel, is on wider boards like plywood, things like that, because as you know, if you're trying to cut sheet goods by yourself, a lot of times it's just kind of hard to hold the exact right pressure across the entire cut so that you can get a good accurate cut holding it square against the fence and all that good stuff. Another added benefit of these stock guides is the fact that it's supporting this drop piece, or the cut piece. The drop piece will fall if you don't have outfeed support, which doesn't necessarily always matter, but it does support the wider piece that I'm cutting here, so it prevents it from falling off. It's a really cool benefit of having these, especially for longer cuts like this. These things are an amazing upgrade to your table saw. If you're looking to get cleaner cuts and safer cuts on your table saw, I highly recommend checking these out. I'll link them in the description and that pinned comment for you. One thing to note about these JessEm stock guides is they're made of all stainless steel, so you're not gonna have to worry about these rusting or corroding. They'll likely last you a lifetime. They're very well made. Now the only drawback to these that I've ever found, including my last set, is sometimes, depending on the width of the cut, these stock guides can get a little bit in the way of your push stick. So you need to kind of think about that ahead of time. Even on these, my gripper got hung up on a little bolt that was sticking out. If I had thought ahead of time, I could have prevented that, but it's just something to be aware of. That's really the only drawback that I found of these, because when they're not in use, you can just store them out of the way. If you've got them mounted on a job site saw, they close up right up against the fence. And because JessEm thought of everything, you can easily pop them off and get them out of the way, and it's not going to affect your fence if you need to cut thicker stock. So I love the fact that these are easily removable and easily put back on. Now if you're using them on the saw stop on a cabinet style saw with this jig, it's even easier because the whole thing comes off with 2 magnets. I've had a set of these stock guides for years, like I said, and I've been nothing but impressed with them, especially when you go to cut very large or wide stock, or even when you're trying to cut just, 2 feet wide plywood and things like that. These are like having a second set of hands, or third and fourth set of hands, because of the pressure they're putting down into the fence. It just helps keep your cuts safer and more accurate. I like them. Second upgrade, I've never owned one of these, but I've always wanted one, and that is a Cove cutting jig. And Rockler makes one that I think you're gonna like. I was very surprised by it. I've never used one of these before, but I've always found them wildly interesting. And I've always kind of wanted one, so I bought this on Amazon. I'll link these in the description below if you want to check it out. I would highly recommend it, especially if you're wanting to do some decorative boxes or just create your own Cove trim or anything like that. This thing's going to do it. But before we got to that, I had to assemble it. So out of the box, everything you need is there, and it assembles in less than about 5 minutes. Probably shorter if I'd actually read the directions. But once I went back and read the directions, I understood how it's supposed to go on there. Everything is there, so you just assemble it. Now, I was a little skeptical and I felt a little sketchy when I first started. And so basically what you're doing is you're creating a new guide for it to go across your blade at an angle, and it's gonna cut a cove using your table saw. Now, this is fantastic. It held, it was solid as a rock. Before I started the cut, I was like, man, it's kind of sketchy, but when I started the cut, everything was fine. The only thing I was worried about was cutting into my push stick. You see me try to switch to the gripper, it was just too late. I was already committed, so I went ahead and used it. This is an all red push stick. I'll link to it in the description. Push all the way through the blade. Genuine surprise at how well this worked. Look at that! That's awesome. That is awesome. It worked! If you're looking for one of these, you can cut coves like this. I could go even deeper than I did. I was just test cutting it. Just perfectly coved through this piece of walnut. Link in the description. Shop button as well if it's available. Next upgrade you can make is dust collection. Now, how can you fix the dust collection on a table saw? Not necessarily fix it, but make it easier. Now, Lightning Lock sent over some of these a while back, and I've been extremely impressed. They just mount to basically any tool you have. Just that pipe clamp there, tighten that down. This one adapts to my table saw outlet on the back, as you can see. And now the magnet from my flex hose, because I'm in a small shop, I gotta be able to move things around like this. I use a flex hose on all of my tools, and I can just mag switch it on there. And the great thing about these is your hose never gets tangled up because it can pivot and move around. And you can quick change. So if I'm using this table saw, or I'm using the cabinet saw, or the band saw, or the jointer, or the planer, like all of these just mag attach. That's why I like them. Next up, if you need to dial in the perfect accuracy on your fence, especially those that have this T-glide style fence like it's on the Saw Stop and many other saws, this from Canyon Fire Tools is genius. Now, I did feature this a couple weeks in a video about makers making tools. Now, he's a small maker in a garage like you and me, and he's making this amazing tool. Now, this magnetically attaches to your fence, and then you use the mag switch to lock it in place. You can micro adjust, dial in the perfect setting for your table saw. So if you're making dados or you just need that accurate, perfect cut, this is the way you're going to get it, especially on this style fence. Patent pending on this, and I think he's got a hit on his hands. I think one of the easiest and best ways, especially for a beginner woodworker, to upgrade their table saw is to make your own table saw sled and or jointing jig. Now, I've got two of these. I got plans available for these. I'll link them in the description below. If you want to check these out, I'll give you a discount code to save 25% off each one of these, or you can pick up the bundle of shop project plans where they're included. But before I give you the code, let me show you how they work. Now, most people have seen a crosscut sled. If you're a beginner, you may not have. This is a very easy way to get crosscuts that are accurate. In other words, a 90-degree cut every single time. You can get these repeatable cuts, so you don't have to worry about having a miter saw in a lot of cases. Now, making these can't be easier. You're just going to use plywood. There's a whole build video on this and the jointing jig, so I won't go into a lot of details. But what I did with mine is I put handles on it to make it safer, keeps your hands away from that blade. And then also there is a way to add a miter into this, so you can miter 45 degrees or 25, whatever you need, whatever degree you need there. So there is options for that available. Now, jointing jig, it replaces an edge jointer. So if you don't have a jointer, you can joint the edge of the boards, or you can make tapered cuts using a jointing jig. This uses a match fit system, a very easy way to cut dovetail grooves into plywood, and then you can make various jigs with it. I give you 25% off either one of these plans, or you can pick up the shop project bundle if you just use the code must-have-jig. All one word, must-have-jig, and then you can get 25% off. That's a great way to upgrade your table saw on the cheap. If you like this video, you got to check that video out. Why doesn't everybody make those miter saw upgrades as well? Click in the box, get you the big old virtual fist bump.